Hi, my name is Kit Falbo. I am the writer of The Crafting of Chess and other books and poetry. And today I'm going to talk about dead projects. Everyone who's a writer, has many projects that they've begun and killed off. And today I've decided I'm going to share one of those that I did. I wrote this about 4 years ago, maybe a little bit longer. One of my early LitRPG ideas. And then I'm going to talk about, after I'm done reading it, some of the issues. I'm only going to read the first chapter. I have almost 2 chapters of this, and then I kind of dropped it to work on other projects. This is called, tentatively, The Dungeoneer. I'm going to start reading it, and then I'm going to talk about it after I'm done doing it. Across the world of Earth, places of power exist. Dungeons where brave souls can venture in search of money, magic, knowledge, and power. The further you go, the greater the risks and the rewards. Their beginnings are lost to the sands of time as the answer to why they are the way they are. Features of the land as much a part of it as a tree or a mountain. Few ponder the nature of them, other than the best ways to get the power they hold. Even fewer still actively seek those answers. Then there are those who think they've got it all figured out. In the tavern at the outskirts of the town of Grove that serviced the smallest dungeon around, ask anyone else, and they won't tell you the truth. Dungeons are the perfect predator. They kill us and still have us coming back wanting more. If it was just promises of wealth, power, a longer life, then maybe the normal man could ignore it and decide that the risk is not worth their life. But it's the little things that it does to get you. Take a special date out for a meal made from 4 or 5 ingredients. Food from the outside of the dungeon starts to taste like ash in your mouth by comparison. The deeper you... Doug's spiel to a prospective adventurer was interrupted by someone grabbing him by his collar and flinging him to the other side of the crooked henhouse. While flying through the air, he was not shocked to recognize the man who had thrown him across the room. After all, Grimby had grown up with him. There was a crunch when he landed, but it was from a chair rather than him, one of the advantages of being leveled. You break it, you buy it, Grimby. Stu the barkeep barked, caring more about his chair than Doug, who he knew could take it. Grimby's response was to immediately drop a few loose coins from his purse onto the bar. Doug slowly eased himself up, staring at the man who threw him. He knew it was the level difference that caused him to be tossed with such ease. Grimby was only 2. He squinted to analyze the man. No 3 levels above Doug's level cap 10. He'd undergone a class ritual at a dungeon shrine to become a bruiser, which exemplified strength over all else. And Grimby may have lost intelligence when making the choice. He also may have even used a granted skill to make that throw, which could get him slapped with a fine for using one outside a dungeon. You don't want to listen to that classless coward, not when you're about to start the adventure of your life, Brass. I'll leave you alone for a few minutes to take a leak, and that gutter puppy is already here trying to convince you of the evils of adventuring. Doug's never been past the first level. Grimby spat in Doug's general direction before leading Brass out of the tavern to start his initiation as an adventurer. Doug just watched them go with the feeling of resignation as he made his way back to the bar. This was the kind of business that kept the town of Grove active around its small dungeon, the garden alive. At only 30 floors before the last exit and no recent record of any expansion, it only really had 2 benefits. One is the unique selection of some classes like Grimby the Bruiser, and the other being the only dungeon in 100 leagues. So if you wanted to start out adventuring or pick up some levels for military service or just to impress a girl and don't want to go too far from your home, you can come to the garden. Stu handed Doug a drink. You can't win them all. Doug took it and downed the drink in one gulp. It tinkled and wormed him as it went down. Probably some diluted first slime went into the brewing of the brew. Doug certainly sold enough to the man. He'd never had one, but someone had once said it tasted like lime. It doesn't seem like I'm winning any of them. Ever. Stu plucked the empty glass away and began cleaning it. What do you expect? Most people coming here have made their decisions long before they made it to this town to try the dungeon. Grimby probably recruited him from Lennon or Tricastle and took a down payment on this experience before bringing him back here. The people who come in are why I even have a job. Aren't you tired of watching those fresh-faced kids with the stars in their eye come into town only to never come out again? Most of the time they don't even know a tenth of what they should before entering. That fresh-faced kid has a few years in you, Doug. Sure, it hurts when they don't come back. But no matter what Grimby tells them, everyone knows you face death in a dungeon. No one hasn't known someone who hasn't come back. Doug closed his eyes and envisioned his stats. Doug Neon Nurse. Level 10 classless. Experience max. Body 23, strength 25. Constitution 22, reflexes 24, agility 23, dex 26, mind 27, wisdom 26, intelligence 28, hurt 24, will 28, charisma 20. Class skills none. Learn skills. Body, general weapons, general armor, swimming, reflexes, dodge, aim, pick locks, disarm traps, mind, reading, meditation, puzzle solving, analyze. Hurt, trading, resist fear. Earn traits, dungeon helper, dungeon bird. That last trait always made Doug's chest tighten. Most adventurers were smart enough not to go into a dungeon pregnant so close to birth. His mom was not one of them. I just want to give them a chance to say no to adventuring, something I never had. Stu shrugged at that. He already knew Doug's sad story. You had to make your peace with people dying in a dungeon town. Even with Doug's high level for only staying on the first floor, he always worried that one day Doug wouldn't come back. After all, there were much more dangerous things on the first floor than the monsters there, like the adventurers that preyed on them. Reaching under the bar, he pulled out a crate of bottles. While you're making sure as many of those low levels don't die today, I would appreciate you collecting as much slime essence as you can from me. Doug nodded and started to put the dozen or so bottles into his dimensional satchel. It was one of those deep-level dungeon rewards. You couldn't dive deep enough in the garden to find one before you hit the 30th floor, and could only access an exit. Doug had spent years of earnings and pay to get one rather than go in heavy with supplies that even his heightened strength he had a hard time handling. He felt a little guilty using a resource from a dungeon, but no one, as far as he knew, had been able to figure out how to make him. No promises. It's not like this dungeon's monsters spawn on a schedule. Leaving the tavern, Doug headed for the guild general store at the top to top off on supplies before going to the entrance to the dungeon. He knew he didn't have to work in the dungeon. Plenty of people picked up a few levels, usually a class, and then some skills, and then headed out into the world. Even classless at level 10 with his skills, many of the militaries would accept his service in every city guard. It makes you smarter, quicker, stronger than any average person just to have a few levels. But he knew there was an unfairness in that advantage. Take a job that could have gone to someone else not benefiting from dungeon influence, the more people would think that they need to find a dungeon and gain levels to succeed. It became another part of the vicious cycle that only fed the beasts. Then there was his curse, Dungeon Burn. It had made him a sickly child. Too long away from a dungeon, and you got a 5% penalty to, well, everything. You ever have a cold that just wouldn't go away, a slight ache to your bones and muscles, a constant little bit of suffering and knowing you're not as good as you should be? Inside the dungeon, though, you got a 5% boost to everything. It was as insidious as everything the dungeon did to get more victims, and Doug hated it. Some days he would feel angry at his mom for going in while pregnant. It was an early birth, and he suspected if he had been burned anywhere else, there would have been no survival for him, though. Then there was the guilt because everyone who goes into dungeon frequently, she was taken by one too. He shook off those dark thoughts. After all, today was a chance, like every other day, to save a life and thwart the dungeon. Maybe even make a little money along the way. He consciously avoided looking at the children's house as he made his final part of the trip to the guild shop. The house was supported by the Guild of Adventurers, a randy and fertile bunch, so they could leave their kids there in every dungeon town while they went down the floors to get stronger and earn a living. It also doubled as an orphanage when they didn't return. It had been his and Grimble's home for longer than he had ever wanted while growing up. The sign above the guild star was simple. It merely said Guild Star. It was familiar, overpriced, and the only show in town. Sure, they allowed specialty shops and places to get things repaired, but you couldn't sell items that were also sold in the Guild Star, and a percentage of your profits were taxed by the guild for the privilege of operating in a guild-controlled town. Doug waved at Bigsby, the dwarf of a man who ran the shop, as opposed to being an actual dwarf, one of the rumored special changes you could get from some shrine halfway around the world. Rumors that he had been sent to this little pissant dungeon of a town as some kind of punishment for breaking guild rules. He was a high-level mercantilist class, so clearly he was familiar with dungeons, though Doug had never seen him go into one. Bigsley started grumbling the moment he saw Doug, but was already digging through his inventory and pulling out things that the young man usually bought. You know, I should charge you extra for this stuff, boy, considering you were just going to go in and sell it to adventurers who are ignoring my suggestions for the first time. Doug lifted his finger. But not selling things at guild prices goes against the rules. He pulled out a shopping list and passed it over. Bigsley walked back to his inventory to get what he missed: 2 coils of rope, an anchoring spike, a cold frosted club, and a bunch of odds and ends. For someone who can spout the guild rules, you really should think about getting a class so you can join the guild. I would even be willing to hire a group to take you to the shrine of your choice, out of the goodness of my heart. Sending the last of what was on the list in front of Doug. That'll be 75 gold, 12 silver, and 8 copper. Doug put his hand in his satchel and focused on the amount and pulled it out in stacks of 10. If I get a class and have to join the guild, I'll be the first to let you know. Shoving the supplies into his bag, he gave the mercantilist a smile. Being classless was a loophole. The guild wouldn't let you into a dungeon without a class, and if you had a class, you had to sign up for the guild. But with it came the rules and the membership fees. Doug knew the guild did good things. Wars were waged over dungeons for the power that could be gained in them. That was until the guild firmed and stepped in to take control over them all. Almost the strongest independent nation in its own right, it literally had the source of wealth and power and set forth rules to help guarantee dungeons wouldn't be abused too much. Doug was a little bit bitter that rules preventing pregnant adventurers from entering wasn't included. Once he could read his own status and realizing why he was sick all his life, he'd worked as a child mule for dungeon spoils on the first floor just to feel a reprieve. Doug waved to the familiar entrance guards, the pair standing in front of the large vine-carved archway that marked the entrance into the dungeon were also Children's House graduates. Though they had left long before Doug arrived, they still frequently visited the orphanage and had helped train many of the kids, even adopting a child together from there. Drac, Davidage, how busy is it in there today? Drac rubbed his hand over his bald head, thinking. Chrissy's group's been inside since yesterday, but they are probably well past the first flare. She's got some vets escorting her to the Deadeye Shrine. Doug shuddered a little. That class required you to cut out one of your own eyes and replace it with a gem as part of the class requirements for using the shrine. There are only a few classes you could switch to and not have a problem after losing your eye that way. A few adventurers who had been blinded had come to the garden to get the shrine, as you could get new eyes that gave you better vision. 4 other groups are in that will probably stick to the first floor, but it's still early in the day. I know Grimby has an escort that should be in soon to get his first level. Doug didn't show that he'd already run into them. The first floor was big and could easily have 100 adventurers down its branching paths, dealing with its traps and monsters. Thanks for the information. The first floor was recommended for groups between levels 1 and 5. Doug always felt a little bit of fear before going in. Despite all the time spent in here, there had been more brushes of death than he had liked. He also wasn't in a group. Steeling himself, he stepped through the arches and inside the dungeon. The end of Chapter 1. Now, I did write a little bit of a Chapter 2 before I eventually chose to give up on this project. I kind of liked the beginning action part, but obviously somewhere near the end of the first chapter I get a little bit exposition-y and a little bit overly telling in what is going on rather than showing in the world. And eventually I just gave up on the story, as we all do, but years ago. But I still find aspects of it fun, or I would not have wrote it. And what else I'm going to do but share it on YouTube? Now, if you enjoyed that, I like to think that the books that I have out, like The Crafting of Chess, Intelligence Block, The Card Job, are all a bit better than that piece. And you can go online on Amazon and buy them. You could subscribe. But I thought it had been a while since I've uploaded a video, and I thought I'd share this today. If any of you are watching it, I hope you enjoyed it.